quick one. Information alone isn't transformation. I've read enough books and listened to enough fucking podcasts to know that. If you want to do more than just listen, my weekly groups are in the show notes. I'm Chad.Taylor.Psychotherapist, author of It's You, Oh Fuck, It's Me. No tips, no fixing, just real conversations. Today I've got Max with me. Max, who the fuck are you?
I love it because that's when I asked you the question. So I'm a recovering person for almost 23 years. This September on the 27th, I'll celebrate 23 years clean and sober. But first and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm a husband, a father, and a grandfather of 12, which I love that job.
Grandfather of 12.
Yeah, and I've been in the addiction field as well for 17 years as a substance abuse counselor. So I got many hats.
Many hats. What brought you onto the podcast today?
This dude named Chad asked me to come on here and say, let's have a great conversation because he blessed me with his presence and we had a wonderful conversation about who Chad was and what Chad does. And I said, sure, I'm honored to be here, right? Because we just wanted to have a real down-to-earth conversation about what's going on in the world today, but how we as people, right? I like from previous guests, like us having a spirit. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we have to be a little bit more spiritual, I think. Chad and I discussed that before on the podcast when he was a guest.
Yeah, and straight into it. What's going on in the world today, or what's our reaction to what's going on in the world today is the biggest thing that's the topic of conversation, isn't it?
I love that you bring that up because, right, you and I, you'll relate to this. In early sobriety, I was taught that I had to slow down and learn to respond instead of react. But in my humble opinion, when I get caught scrolling through social media and watching the news, we see a lot of reaction going on where people, I think, aren't taking time to connect with each other, to get to know each other, but, based off whatever belief you have or political affiliation, right? You're either a bad person or it's, to me, on my 58 years on this earth, it's been the craziest time, at least for me, to see this stuff going on, which tells me that I really have to stay on the path and treat people with kindness and love and compassion and respect, right? Because I think I told Chad one of my favorite quotes from Jesse Jackson is, you never look down on anyone unless you're picking them up or helping them up. So, that's been my purpose ever since I got sober is, because after 4 relapses, my sponsor said, well, I am responsible, right? So when I said that, right, that really hit me after my last relapse. And it goes like this, right? I am responsible. When anyone, anywhere cries out for help, let the hand of AA be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And my sponsor said, you're going to take the AA part out and put when anybody, right? Not just people in meetings. It could be someone on the street that needs your help, holding the door open for someone. And that was probably the best advice he could have gave me at the time because it made me really focus, right? Instead of focusing on myself and what I needed, it turned it around to see where I could be helpful, right? So I could take the focus off myself and actually do some work, and do something worthwhile because, before getting sober, it was all about me. And it didn't matter who I hurt. It was, I was going to get what I needed to get, and it wasn't going to, no one or nothing was going to stop me. Unless I landed with those silver bracelets, and then for a little bit, yeah, I got stopped, but
it still can be all about us. I think that's part of what I see in the work that I do, but I usually go straight into a business promo straight up, just in case somebody finishes the podcast early. I want my guests to get their spiel out at the start rather than leave it until the end. Who do you work with and where can people find you?
So I'm on every social media, I think just about LinkedIn, TikTok, mostly on Facebook and Instagram. So on Instagram, you can find me at the Fearless Happiness Ninja or Fearless Happiness Podcast. On Facebook, it's Max.Nijst. Where else am I? And that's about, I think, the major ones that I'm on. And then I have a website. You can reach me at maxnijst.org. And it shows you what I do there, which I have a private practice, even though I still continue to work in the addiction field. I'm kind of like the continuation when someone, I'm like the accountability partner that someone needs once they leave treatment. Because I don't know about you, Chad, but I think you can relate to this too. When I got out, it was like, what do I do now? Because I was in that little cocoon of a place, kept safe, had rules. And so I kind of help people with some accountability, along with some substance abuse counseling and recovery coaching, and just helping them learn some tools to let them keep thriving instead of just surviving. That's what I do.
Yeah, there's a big difference between emotional sobriety and abstinence from drugs and alcohol, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize the difference, that you put the drugs and the alcohol down and you don't replace it with a program, or you don't start to work on the issues deep down that cause the drug and alcohol use or the gambling, or it doesn't really matter what the behavior was. You don't actually work on that. We may as well be drinking and drugging, because we're just as fucking detrimental to ourselves and to people around us.
Absolutely. And I found that out the hard way, right? Where in my early recovery, the first time around, where I wanted to look good, right? And keep obviously probation or whatever off my back, but never really like doing the steps, if you know what I mean, like really, because I would get to the fourth step and it's like, I still had that mentality. I'll tell my sponsor this, but he doesn't need to know that, right? Like, I'm not going to snitch on myself, right? Because of that jail mentality or street mentality. But once you get your butt kicked enough, I finally, after my last relapse, which was only a day, right? One use, but the guilt and shame that kicked in and the feeling like I had been out there for another 20 years, it was, I can't describe it, right? But I look in the mirror and it's like I'm looking at myself and there's two ways I could go. I could go to prison, or I'm going to die doing this. So what am I going to do? And I remember dropping to my knees and asking God for help and going, God, okay, I know I've asked you for help before, but if you keep me sober, I promise to do the work to stay sober. And that's why I'm here almost 23 years later, right? Because then I finally got to that fourth step and I was like, I'm going to tell my sponsor everything. I'm not holding back. And that was one of the most difficult things to do, right? Because, you don't want to tell people your deepest, darkest secrets, right? But that man, by sticking by my side through those 4 relapses, really showed me that he cared, and that, he wasn't trying to tell me how to do recovery, but he was showing me by his actions how recovery was done. And it's been an amazing journey, right? And then along that, like, I've gone back to school. When I was going to school to become a certified substance abuse counselor, one of the things they teach you, and I'm sure you heard this in school too, like, a good therapist has a therapist, right? Then that meant for me, I really had to dig deep and get those root causes of why, for me, of finally figuring out, it was like my anger and resentment at my father, even my mother, and most of all myself, right? Because I swore when I was growing up and I got married, I would never be my dad. And I ended up being worse, right? Because my addiction took off and I could literally be 2 houses down, but the shame and guilt was so bad that I wouldn't see my kids. And that lasted for like 9 years until I finally surrendered and got sober.
This is exactly the conversations we have and the content we study in the weekly group. If you're interested, the details are in the show notes. Love to see you there.
Thank God for yourself and for the kids and for everybody around you that you did, because we're a minority. The amount of funerals and the amount of suffering I've seen through untreated addiction or untreated alcoholism in the world is fucking phenomenal. And even hearing you then 4 relapses, people listening that aren't an addict and alcoholic are probably thinking, fuck, mate, why did it take 4 times? But it takes what it takes. And I think the most abnormal thing for an addict and an alcoholic to do is not use or drink.
Well, in your studies, I know in my studies and with one of my mentors who was a teacher, also a licensed marriage and family therapist, but who helped here in California put together the board that oversees certification. And He was very active until the day he died. I always called him Mr. Laws and Ethics, and he was always the guy I could go to. And he pulled me aside one day when I was visiting class, and he goes, there's proof now that it's in your DNA, right? Like you're predisposed to addiction if it's anywhere in your family, right? And I like to say fortunately, right? Because it led me to where I am today, but I have it on my dad's side. I have it on my mother's side. And, four of my children all have the ism. Two of them are sober. But there's also, the people that say, well, that's not true, right? Because I have kids whose fathers or whatever are, but they're totally opposite. And absolutely, right? Sometimes that gene doesn't affect them. But I know for me, because I have an older brother who's going to be 45 years clean this year in December. I have another brother who's sober, who's 10 years older. And then my youngest brother who passed away because he lost his battle to addiction and decided to take his own life, right? So it runs deep. And I kind of always knew, but I don't know about you, Chad, but I never heeded the red flags. I was like, that's not me, right? It ain't going to happen to me, but it happened.
I think it progressed so quickly in me that I was a kid. By the time I was in addiction and alcoholism, I was a kid, really. So I don't even think I think I knew I was an alcoholic when I was 16. I was already trying to manage my drinking at 14, manage how much I drank and whether I drank light beer or whether I drank full strength beer. And this was at 14 years old. So I knew I chased it I was really like my sponsor always used to say to me, you were the pig at the trough. For him, his drinking progressed to, and I was pretty resentful about that. I used to go to meetings at 22 years old and I'd say, it's all right for all you fucking old pricks. You guys got to drink till you were 50. I'm fucking 22 and I'm in here, and I was so resentful, but it's the only place you can go where you can get up and abuse the fuck out of everyone really and say, I don't want to fucking be here, but I have to be here. And exactly that. It's all right for you guys. You've got to drink till you're fucking 50. And it's like, right. Thanks. Keep coming back. Keep coming back. I get the clap. And I think I couldn't do it. Hopefully I'm not doing that after 5 years, but in the early days, I didn't want to fucking be there. I was in this point where I knew I couldn't drink and drug anymore, more drink for me than drugs, but I knew I couldn't live that life anymore. But I really didn't want to fucking live a life without drinking and drugging, because to me at 22, that was like, I'd rather be dead. But I think we talk a lot about staying in the middle of the herd, staying in the middle of the tribe. If you stay in the middle of the herd, you can't get pecked off. If we're crossing the river and it's full of alligators, the safest place to be is right in the middle of the pack. And I think that's what I did. Even though I didn't want to really go, I knew it was either I'd be in the middle of the pack at the pub, being a fucking idiot, or bottle shop, or I could be in the pack, even though I didn't want to be there. And I think the people in the rooms, I don't know if I really like that word, love me back to life, because it wasn't easy for me. I feel like I've been just as ostracized in the rooms because I'm a bit of a rule breaker than what I have as anywhere else. I was never in the cliquey group anywhere I've been, but I stuck with it. And I think now it's allowed me to live the life that I live today and work with the people that I work with. I've just come back from Bali. I went over to Bali for the International Alcoholics Anonymous Convention, and then a week later they have the Narcotics Anonymous Convention. And so I had a big 8 or 9 days full of fellowship and connection, and then I got asked to go and talk in a rehab at the top of Bali Island, and they drove us up there and put us up and fed us. And I was sort of saying when I was there, and I've always said this, I'd fucking go and live in a rehab if I could. And I know you said you work in treatment facilities, because that is my tribe, right? When I'm around those people, I feel they're probably the people that understand me the most outside of my family and my friends. My partner understands me, but she's one of us. She's in recovery. But I think a lot of people don't get it. Even when you said then 4 relapses, I think people that don't understand this think, why the fuck would you do that 4 times? Didn't you get it the first time?
The first time was my worst, right? Like that was a 3-day run right back to where I left off. You know what I mean? As it never gets better, it always gets worse. And I asked myself that too, but when you're in the grips, right? And the last three weren't bad. I was getting high and drinking, right? And sneaking off, but I wasn't like the first one. But like I said, the one day was one use, but it felt like I had been running the streets again for 20 years doing, and like you too. I mean, I got sober at 32, and I thank God for the fellowship, right? Even though when I came back after the fourth one, because you're right? You get the looks like, oh, here he goes again. Like, is he going to stay sober, right? You get the looks and the whispers and, right? And even though some of it, and 99.9% of it was in my head, like for instance, one time we're at a meeting, I'm sitting next to my sponsor, right? And meeting hadn't started yet, but we're sitting in our chair and I could look at people across the room and they're like whispering, right? Talking to each other. In my head, I'm like, hey, Daryl, check that out. And they're talking shit on me. And he's all, what? Like I go, yeah, look at them, man. They're talking shit. He goes, Max, he goes, well, I got bad news for you. You're not that important. Shut up and listen, right? And I loved it, right? Because he never yelled at me. Everything was a suggestion. But when I needed like the kick in the butt like that, I was like, dang, he's right, right? They're probably not even talking about me. But this journey of like the onion, right? The uncover, discover, and discard, right? Which you and I get to do on a daily basis, right? And like some people, like my wife, she's a normie. Well, she won't tell you she's a normie, but she's not one of us, right? And she through
The poor thing. I
right,
feel for her. I feel for her.
but she's been surrounded by addicts and alcoholics, so she gets it. But certain things she like, I'll teach her and tell her what I mean, and that's why we have that discussion. She's like, look at my kids, right? Their dads aren't, they were all suffered at one point, one still is, but all her children are productive, right? They're good parents, they take care of their families. Because like that first drink, like you said, I take the first drink and then that drink takes me. There's no moderation whatsoever, because then you get that fuzzy warm feeling for a minute, then you go chasing it, right? And then other things come into play. Then, oh, if that was that good, then this must be better. Like I had a talk with a clinical director one time, and he goes, I don't get how people say there's functioning alcoholics, right? There's no such thing as a functioning alcoholic that I know of, right? Every alcoholic I know doesn't function well. But we had the discussion, and he had met some valid points. And he goes, I probably would call it something else, but this path, right, of like turning inward, because I know you could relate to this too. Like when they said, I got to turn inward and really take a look at what is going on with me that I need to change, right? I remember my sponsor would suggest that, right? We're going to do the steps, and you're going to have to take a deep look. You got to be honest with me 100%, or I can't help you. Right. And, but it taught me, right, that nothing was going to get better if I didn't tell him what was going on or tell him the truth, whether I was having a good day or a bad day, or even a blah, not a bad or good day, just kind of going with the flow. Right. I learned with him to get honest. And I'm talking sometimes brutally honest, right? But they teach us rigorous honesty in the program. I just had to, certain people I had to be rigorously honest with, right? Because that brutal honesty might damage a relationship. But it's the best thing that's ever happened for me. It's the best thing I think if my kids and my grandkids were to tell you, they wouldn't want their Opa or their dad any other way but sober, right? Because that's all they've known. None of them have ever seen me pick up a drink or a drug. My children, my grandchildren, or anybody. So, and like you said, I have a small, there's 7 of us from when I went to treatment / sober living. There's 7 of us. My sponsor just turned 25 years sober on Sunday. So he's now officially an old timer. So I got to call him and go, you're officially an old timer now, man. He goes, you're right behind me, right? But there's 7 of us that still talk to this day that are all 20 plus years sober, right? In some circles, that's rare. But we all made a decision, right? Because we talk about it in the book, right? We make a decision to turn our life and our will over to the care of God as we understood him or her, whatever you want to believe. But I believe there's a power greater than myself that's keeping me on this path. I just have to continue doing the work. And I got plenty of people when I should be going left will tell me, Max, you're going right. You need to go the other way.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to you guys to still be alive, because that isn't the statistics at all. So what I do in this podcast, the last guest leaves a question or a statement or a line for the next guest. And the last guest left, what are you most willing to sacrifice for someone?
Oh, wow.
What happens when you feel that? What happens to you when you hear that? What resonates?
See, I think I'm not the richest man in the world, right? But I believe I have a great life, right? Because of sobriety. So that always, like I said, and it's things we see. I think about, I saw this thing last night, right? My wife, I could hear her going, oh my, like under her breath cussing, right? Because she saw something that was pretty brutal, right? So what I would say is I would give my life up for my kids and grandkids, for them never to even experiment with a drug or a drink, right? Just because I know, like you said, I can't even count anymore on either people I do know that decided to go out and never came back, never made it back, or as a veteran, I've known many combat vets who 22 a day, right? They didn't make it. Yeah, it's just that's what I think of when you ask that question, right? I would give my life. I think I've lived a full life. So if God came down and said, what would you do? I say, take me. Make sure they don't ever have to experiment with a drink or a drug.
Yeah, and that's amazing, right? Because I think coming from that world, I don't know how my daughter's going to go yet. I've got two daughters, and I don't know if they are going to be the same as me. And I guess that's something that comes up when we've got kids, is I'm learning to not force my will onto my kids. We don't know, I don't think, whether it's genetics, whether it's environmental, whether it's a spiritual issue, whether it's all of the above. Now they're seeing more it's a digestive enzyme problem, and that's the allergy comes from a lack of digestive enzymes, and that when we put alcohol in our system and drugs, the liver, the digestive enzymes in the liver can't process the alcohol, and the drug's the same, and it almost sends signals to the brain and tells us we need more, which to me makes a lot of sense, because 50 years ago, they used to inject alcoholics with vitamin B and things like that. And part of this digestive enzyme issue is that we don't absorb alcoholics don't seem to absorb vitamin B the same as other people. So I don't know
Right.
about you, but we've got to take an activated vitamin B to get the vitamin B, because we have a deficiency in it, which drives the allergy. There's so much that it goes on behind the scenes, I think. Yeah. And to avoid that suffering for our kids, I would give anything, because
Yeah.
fuck, it's not a nice life, right? Especially I'm a man, and when I was drinking, I was overweight and fucking just a complete mess. So women didn't really take advantage of me then, but having two daughters, I really pray and hope for them that they don't have this illness that I suffer from, this dis-ease. And if people can't cop the disease component, I tell them just to hyphenate it, that we're at dis-ease, which,
Right. Absolutely. I love
yeah. So I'm going to ask you, obviously I gave you a copy of my book after your podcast. What from my book landed for you, do you think?
it. Right. Because I caught myself doing it even at 20, almost 23 years sober, right? Is his title, Chad's title. It's you, because I found myself just the other day doing that to my wife, like, it's you. And then I happened to glance down at my phone and your book was on, right? And I laughed at her and I go, sorry, honey. Oh, fuck, it's me. I'm sorry, right? Even with a lot of time, and Chad will probably tell me or back me up on this, validate it, right? Doesn't mean we're perfect, right? But those things over the years that we used to do are still, right? Those unconscious things that drive us will find its way back to the surface. And I have found myself, especially if I know I'm working hard, right? And I make a mistake, when your boss calls you on it, right? Not mad, but I find that I get angry because I'm ready to like rip his head off and go, how dare you tell me I'm wrong? Because I'm perfect. I mean, but I love that, right? I love your title, because I think everybody needs to read your book, because I think the more we can point the finger back at ourselves and work on ourselves, the less will be, it's you. Oh, fuck, it's me. We'll be able to
Why
get
do
along.
you think we do that? Why do you think we blame others? Why do you think our instant reaction to everything is to blame others rather than look at ourselves? What do you think a human drive? Why do you think because this is a common issue in the world, projection is we're all
Right.
projecting, right? What is it about human beings that do that?
I'm going to just say from my personal experience in my studies in psychology, those stories we tell ourselves or that have been built from the time we were children, right? I think I talked to you about it on when you're on my podcast, right? I was helping an uncle sell some stuff at a swap meet and I used the calculator, right? So I could give the customer the correct change. But right there, he belittled me in front of the customer and then did it again and told my mom, and then she did it in front of everybody in the family. And so it was one of those stories. That's like one of the things I can think of where it's like I have to point the finger at you because I'm still that hurt little child that got told his math sucked, right? Which is, I know some people are going to go, what does that have to do? But the story I told myself was I was not good enough, right? In order for me to feel good enough, I had to point the finger and point it back at you to get that heat off me. And that worked for many years. And then, as Chad and I know, it doesn't work, right? I have to take a look at myself. If I want to be the change in the world, I have to make the change. Or like Michael Jackson's song, The Man in the Mirror. That song gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it. Not because it's Michael Jackson, because it's so true. He says, I'm paraphrasing, right? Is like, if you want to make the change, look at the man in the mirror and then go make that change. That's how we're going to change. That's how you and I, Chad, are going to be the best fathers possible. Because I have 2 daughters as well. And I have a son, 2 sons. And then I have stepdaughters and granddaughters. So it's, it still happens, right? And I'm still a work in progress, not perfection. But that's where I have found in my own backyard, as they say, is that's why I did it. Because when I would sit and reflect, it was like, okay, I was getting put down again. So my defense mechanism was to blame you for my problems.
Same as what your mum and your uncle did, right? Like, this is the problem. It's a big game of tag. It's a big game of tag in the world. We're just tagging everybody with this shit that we've picked up along the way because we don't know how
Yep.
to deal with it. So we just pass it on to someone else through tag. Like, even when you tell that story, what is it about us adults that don't belittle my daughter? But if I'm completely honest, there's certain things she does that I try and push her to change, say chewing her fingernails and things like this. And it's not belittling her. It's like, hey, darling, do you reckon you could stop that? And then a lot of it is, for me, it's like, why? When I really go in and I do an inventory on it, what is it about that bothers me? What is it? I want to tell her inventory, but things she might do that I think I'm trying to make her conform into what I think she should be so that it soothes me. Like, at the end of the day, I was just thinking about that story and I don't want to follow it too much, but what you just said then, it's like you were damned if you did and you were damned if you didn't. If you didn't use the calculator and you gave the wrong change, you would have copped it. You do the right
Right.
thing as a little kid and you use the calculator, so you give the right change and you copped it. We're
Yep.
fucking, we are so unconscious as human beings. And this isn't a bag out on your uncle and your mum at all. It's just we're so that I don't think we understand the effect we have on other people. Because a lot of us in relationships or with our children, parenting, it doesn't really matter what it is. I think we do put a lot of people in positions where they can't win.
Absolutely. Right. And what I've learned, like a lot of it's generational. They were taught what they were taught. They know what they know. And I plan on being one of those that breaks that generational curse because a lot of times, I don't know about you when you were growing up, but when I was growing up, like that generation, my older generation, it was like, do as I say, not as I do. Right. And they were always telling you, do this, do that. And you couldn't talk back or you couldn't say anything. But what I want to do, right, if I'm going to be that change, like if I see something going on with my kids or my granddaughters or grandsons or whatever, right? Because no one ever explained like when you couldn't do something or if you got in trouble, that was it, right? You got in trouble, but if you can catch them, right? And I think they'll remember it. Say they do something wrong, you tell them, and then you tell them why, then they're going to understand, right? But I never got told that. It was either the wooden spoon or you're going to your room or you're on restriction, right? With no explanation. So growing up, it's like, I know if I do something bad, this is going to happen, right? So I got to be sneaky and not get caught.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I almost get the opposite from my daughter because I do give her the explanation. If I've yelled at her and sent her to a room, which is very rare, or something like that, and I open the door and I've done my inventory. I've done the inventory and I see my part in it, that I might have overreacted or that I was carrying stuff from the day that ended up coming out on her, because we're all human. And I go in, she'll almost just look at me and roll her eyes and say, "Dad, do we have to do this? Can you just yell at me like a normal parent and just leave it at that?" She doesn't like the understanding. So I get the opposite, which is quite funny. And I suppose the question I was going to ask you next was, where do you think we can hide behind awareness or identity? Like, where do you think, as counselors and therapists and people in recovery, where do you think we can hide behind that awareness? Or where do you think that, yeah, I suppose that's what I'll ask you, hide behind that awareness of who we think we are in the world?
Wow, that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. Like, hide behind the awareness of who we are.
Well, I have the authority here because I'm a counselor. I'm trained. I've got a university degree. Like, I know human psychology.
Gotcha. I
Or
see what you're
recovery.
saying. I think the only way to and the way I've been taught, right, is to, you meet someone where they're at and try to understand, right? I had this interesting conversation with someone who's in recovery, but they wrote a book about leadership and how you surrender to win. And that was told to me when I was in early recovery by an old timer, right? Like, you need to surrender, Max, to win. And where I came from, and there's no surrender. You just you fight till the end, right? You go down, right? And especially being ex-military, right? You're taught never surrender. And it took me a long time to understand that, right? So what I try to do is let the person I'm working with know that I'm just an equal, right? I just have a couple more days ahead of you. I'm no different, right? And I always tell them, look, we're doing this side by side. And it seems to ease their mind when I do that, right? Like, you're not going to walk behind me. I'm not going to walk in front of you. We're going to do this together, side by side. And most of the time I could see a little light flicker, like, oh, wow, they're not talking down to me. Like, I know nothing and they know everything, right? But that's what I've learned in my recovery. The longer I stay sober, the less I know. And when I
Yeah.
come with that kind of attitude, right, I know that's why I'm a lifelong learner, right? It's funny, since you've been on my podcast, I've been thinking about going back to grad school. So I've been putting out some applications and got to talk to the wife and see if that's okay with her, right? Because I know that's a lot of work. But I want to become a psychotherapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist, because I don't think there's a lot of the times I've had therapy with someone who's just out of school and nothing wrong with them, but they may have no idea what addiction's even about. What I mean, like, but I think with the mental health issues going on in the world, there needs to be more guys like you, Chad, that understand it, that have been in the trenches and continue to stay in the trenches and talk to people that understand our language, right? Because like you said, some people can come and say some things and you're like, man, I didn't know I was in college today. Like, I didn't know I was in a class. Thanks, professor. Can you please explain yourself, right? But and that's why I think you and I got along so well, right? Like, we talk the language of the heart, right? We talk the language that we understand and that people, right? Because iron sharpens iron, right? And like, we have to help each other become better people. I mean, if you believe in God, which I do, that's his sole purpose, is for us to be helping each other, becoming happy, and then turning around and doing it with other people. I mean, there's nothing in the Bible that I know of that says you're going to step on your fellows and get to where you got to go. Like I said, put your hand out, right? Whoever puts their hand back, that's the person you were meant to help at the time, right? And right, I try to keep it very simple so that I try not to, because I've had people do that to me and I'm just like, I understood them, but I'm like, you're really going to use that language that really matters in this situation that we're talking about right now? Right. That's why I love our conversation when you were on my podcast and now, right? We can understand each other, and hopefully the audience does too, because It's all about helping each other, right? Remember that 16-minute TED Talk from the journalist from Great Britain, from England, that talks about everything we know about addiction is all wrong, right? And then he talks about how Portugal legalized all the drugs. It worked really well for a while, but it was the ending that got me, because he was right? Because he would say, okay, what's the opposite of addiction? And you could hear the crowd going, recovery, sobriety, this or that, right? And he's like, yeah, those are good answers. He goes, but the opposite of addiction is connection. So whether you're in recovery or not, I believe we all have to learn how to connect better on a human being level to make this a better world.
Yeah, connection is everything, everything. And that's probably a good spot to leave it, because I try and keep this pretty trimmed. But I'm going to get you to leave one sentence, one question, statement for the next guest.
How can you make this world a better place by starting with you?
Perfect. How can you leave this world a better place? By starting with you. And we'll leave it there.
If you're enjoying these conversations, hit subscribe. Not because I need another fucking follower, but because it helps more people find the show.